Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another edition of PayTalks. It's wonderful to be back again after a few weeks off, and welcome to everyone who's logged in from all around the world and who's watching us. I've got another interesting guest with me today. And I must say that it just feels so good to have you back here, Emma. And thank you so much for coming back, because just to let you all know, a few weeks ago, Emma and I tried to go live on YouTube and we were unsuccessful due to my lack of tech knowledge of YouTube. And Emma has very kindly accepted to come back and do this again. So I must say to you how very appreciative I am of this gesture, Emma. Thank you so much for coming on PayTalks today.
Pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
And today, Emma and I will be talking all things stress.
Yes.
The one fearful word, you know, that we all don't want to hear: stress, because we think it's a really negative thing. And we're going to come, to discussions around there very shortly. But just to let everyone who's watching know that Emma J is a well-being coach who specializes in stress and burnout. And Emma has been doing this for 15 years. So she's very experienced in helping people to become fitter, happier, and healthier. And every time I see Emma, I am so envious of her because of her body and how very healthy and how fit she looks. And, Emma, I always long to be like you.
Oh, bless you. Thank you.
I love food too much. And it's not just the love of food. I love the wrong food as well. So I must confess, I'm not a very healthy eater. And I know that that's a terrible thing, especially for my age. But there we are. I'll leave it there. So, Emma, when did you discover that you wanted to do this? Because you help people, stay fit, stay happier, stay healthier. When did you discover that you wanted to do this? And what was it that led you towards stress and burnout in particular?
Okay, so I've always been fit and healthy. I rode horses for Wales when I was young. I ran for the local harriers, and I did everything I could, really. I've always been very fit, but so were my mum and dad. So I was brought up that way. My dad played football. My mum rode horses as well. So I was brought up that way. I was always the captain of the hockey team, the netball team, and in school I used to win all the athletics in my school, and so it's just been part of my life forever, really. But I had a serious car accident in 2002 where I suffered a head injury and severe depression after that. So I'd gone from being this really bubbly, loud, I was a professional dancer at that point in time, to not leaving my house, to locking myself away and just living a very, very depressed life at that point in time. The only thing that saved me and got me out of that was turning back to my passion of exercise. So encouraged by my mum and all of my family, I went and learned more about exercise, nutrition, health and well-being. Even though I knew quite a lot, I didn't have the qualifications, and that actually pulled me out of my depression. I still suffer, so it hasn't gone away as it probably doesn't for most people, but it pulled me out of that episode of depression and actually gave me a purpose. It gave me a purpose in life. And my purpose, how I seen it there and then, was to help other people that had suffered like I had or I was, and specifically women, because I just felt that I've always been quite slim, and I'm naturally quite slim. I've always exercised. I've always eaten quite well, apart from when that accident happened. And I felt that if I was intimidated to go into a normal gym, then how do other women feel? How do older women feel? Women that are hormonal, women that are suffering with lack of self-confidence, lack of self-belief, women that are overweight. So my mum and I teamed together. We created a ladies only gym, which we ran for 12 years, which was absolutely fantastic. But what I found when I was there, Pay, was, to be honest with you, a lot of these women had bigger obstacles, bigger barriers that were holding them back. I could train them. I could give them the best exercise program. I could give them a great nutrition program, but it was this that was standing in their way. So there was obstacles that were standing in their way, their mindset, their trauma, their experiences, their stress in their life. And I use stress as such a huge umbrella because it is, you know, a lot of people will look at stress as this emotional thing and they'll say, well, I'm not stressed. But actually they're suffering with severe pain, hair loss, maybe reduced libido, fatigue. All of those things correspond with stress. So we use that as a huge umbrella. But what I would like to touch on is what you said in the very beginning, that not all stress is bad. You hit the nail on the head with that, because
that's what I've heard, you know, because stress is just the negative thing. Stress is just bad for you. It's bad for anybody. But then I stumbled upon this knowledge that not all stress is bad.
Yeah.
There is good stress. So tell us about that.
So, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that is important, because what we don't want is for everybody to just be paranoid about the word stress. The body is designed to cope with stress. So obviously we need stress for the brain to adapt to protect us. The brain's ultimate job is to protect us. So if we don't encounter stress on a daily basis, then how can the brain adapt to teach us how to deal with it? So it is important. I mean, when you look at exercise is a stress on the body. It pushes the body to its extreme, but it does that in order for it to adapt and grow and build and get stronger and get fitter. However, it's us that make these things even more stressful because we push them to the extreme. So exercise done correctly, yes, is a stress on the body, but it's a positive stress. Exercise overdone, where people are over-exercising and extreme dieting to go with it, then is actually a negative stress on the body and the mind. So it's about looking things, it's like anything, isn't it? It's about things in moderation. So rather than going to the extreme with anything or going in an all or nothing mindset, it's about finding that middle ground and finding a comfort within that stress zone so that it becomes adaptive rather than reactive.
Oh, wow. And, you know, as you were saying that, I was just thinking about, say, for instance, students, you know, with their GCSEs and stuff, or anyone who's writing a professional exam and has to study really hard for it. Is that positive or negative? Is that stress that we need? I don't know.
It can be seen in both ways. I mean, it is stress that we need, isn't it? Because we want to learn and grow. So as I said, in the same aspect as exercise, you need that stress to learn and grow. So when we're learning and we're cramming in, you know, obviously education, yes, it is a positive. Where that becomes a negative is if they're staying up really late to do that, if they're taking stimulants like energy drinks to keep them awake or loads of coffee to do that. So as I said, we are the ones that make that stress negative. The stress in its natural form, that type of stress, is beneficial for us because we learn and grow from it. But if we're then doing things to make that bigger and greater than it needs to be, then we're turning it into a negative.
Right. Oh, that makes a lot of, you know, sense, because initially I was a bit confused when you said we do need stress every day. And I'm thinking, well, if I have to wake up to go to work in the morning, that's stress. Is that positive or is that negative? I don't know. I would push to say it's negative, but it's not, is it?
It's not so much. I mean, we're looking at it probably too finite here. But I mean, when I'm saying we need to encounter stress every day, I don't mean to its extreme. Obviously, getting up is a stress, because for many people they set an alarm. So for many people, they're forcing themselves to get up. Whereas if you're healthy and you're living a healthy lifestyle, you will naturally wake, which then is not a stress. Does that make sense? So it's when we force something, it becomes a stress. When something happens naturally, like I said, like us doing exercise naturally, running, lifting weights, we get to grow to do that and become better at that. But when we're doing 2 or 3 exercise classes a day, when we're setting our alarm an hour early and we're then pressing snooze 10 times, that becomes a stress. So it depends how you look at it.
Then, you know, what would you say then about people who just love to sleep? I mean, people who are prone to sleeping very long hours, and there are people like that who, given they would stay in bed for like 10 or 12 hours, but then even if they go to bed early, they need to get up at 5 or 6 in the morning to get ready to go to work, and so they set their alarms, you know, only to wake them up, because otherwise they'll just carry on sleeping. Is that a good thing? I don't know.
It's probably because of the lifestyle, though, isn't it? I mean, everybody's individual. It's not one size fits all for in any aspect of life. But if I was looking at that person, I would ask them, okay, what's your food like? What's your exercise regime like? What's your self-care like? What's your rest and relaxation like? Because don't forget, oversleeping is a common denominator for depression. So, you have to individualize that person and ask them what the rest of their lifestyle is like. And I guarantee you'd find somebody that needs to sleep or feels they need to sleep that long probably isn't energizing their body correctly with the right food. They may be using stimulants, which means that the body then is actually drained and exhausted and fatigued after that. So they're unable to wake in the morning. I would probably say not many very healthy people will go to bed early and want to wake up really late. There's something going on there that's causing that.
Right. Okay. So, still thinking around the whole concept of stress in the way that we know it to be, as a reaction to mental or emotional pressure, and how it's often related to a feeling like you're losing control over something, but sometimes there's no obvious cause. When you're feeling anxious or scared, your body releases, as we know, hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol. Not that I know much about those two hormones, but overall, what are the common signs of stress, and especially the negative stress?
Okay, so there's a few things here, if you don't mind me just pulling that question apart. So the body's natural response to stress is to release cortisol and adrenaline, okay? So adrenaline gives that alert, high, hyperactive, okay, I can get this done feeling, whereas cortisol actually gives us the energy to do that by dumping sugar into our body. So just to explain how that works, okay? So obviously, like you said, what I think is important to mention is that in this day and age, we tend to have unrelenting stress daily for most of us. Unless you have that under control, most people's lives are crazy busy at the moment, yeah? So they're looking for the next career pathway, the next step, the next business contract maybe. You're juggling family life, self-care, and all of these things. That's unrelenting stress. So when you're looking at that being continual all day long, you have this continual release of cortisol and adrenaline. Now, as I said earlier, cortisol and adrenaline are important, as any hormone is in the body, and mild stress is important too for your body to adapt and react and the brain to learn how to deal with stress. But when you're talking unrelenting stress that's going on all day long through different aspects of your life, not sleeping properly, poor diet, not exercising or over-exercising, you can look at that in two ways, can't you? Not sleeping properly, then trying to run a business, having a job in the meantime until that business comes off the ground maybe, family life, all of those things are constant and it's unrelenting. So let's look at stress from our ancestors' times, okay? Ancestors, so cavemen, would actually either fight a big animal to kill it and eat it, or they'd fight it to save their own lives or run away from it. And that's exactly what the stress response is. We call it the fight or flight response. So the adrenaline and cortisol give us the energy and alert, pumped feeling to either fight that stress or run away from it. Now, when you look at our ancestors, that would be short-lived, wouldn't it? They'd either fight that animal and run away, or they'd kill it and eat it over the next week, 2 weeks, or month. So after that event, they had a week, 2 weeks, or a month to relax after that and replenish and repair and recover from that event. Whereas when we're talking daily stress in this day and age, that stress is unrelenting and we're not having that time to recover from it, to repair from it, and to allow those stress hormones to actually reset and to lower. Those stress hormones are released constantly for most people these days, and that's when it becomes dangerous. That's when it becomes what we call chronic stress, and that's when illness, fatigue, loss of hair, poor range of movement, depression, anxiety, and all of those things can then occur.
And, I know before we went live, you and I had this little chat, around our daily activities and how they're just becoming, unrelenting and increasing by the day. And I know that, I've tried to kind of cut down on my activities and things that I'm involved with, but it's so difficult.
Yeah.
And I know I shared with you earlier on that only last week I added one more thing on top of million things that I'm already doing. But you just seem to think all of these things are so important.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, there's house care, there's domestic chores, child's care, and all of that.
Yeah.
How do we prioritize what we do?
I think from our conversation, and I'm in the same boat as you at the moment, as much as I teach stress and it is my area of expertise, and I absolutely manage my stress the majority of the time, I have a lot going on at the moment, but it's short-lived. So I'm prepared to accept that and know, okay, for the next 2 weeks, I have this bit of overload that is going to be very tough on me, but I know that in between I have to make sure that my rest is good. I have to make sure that perhaps I cut back on my exercise and just go for a walk. So it's about adapting around it. So instead of trying to do everything, so for me, for instance, instead of trying to do everything where I'm training really hard as well, at the moment I won't be doing that. I'll take a step back from that, and I'll try and manage this 2 weeks better so that I'm allowing my mind to shut off from what's going on and my body to actually take a rest as well. But it is difficult when you have things going on, and it is important to prioritize. And so many people miss the self-care part. And so many people do that now. We're all striving for the next best thing, whether that's money, job, family life, going away on a break or whatever it is. We're always striving for those things instead of taking a step back and saying, okay, is that money really that important? Am I doing okay? If you're not doing okay and you desperately need the extra money, then of course that you have to work around that. But I suppose we have to take a step back and look at what's ultimately the most important thing. Is it our health and happiness, or is it the money or the holiday or whatever that goal is? And maybe restructure that goal a little bit better so that you do have some self-care time in that. And don't forget, that doesn't have to take hours. It can take minutes each day.
Oh, really? Because I was thinking, as you were listing those things, I was thinking to myself, oh, it's all of it. I want all of it. I want all of it. I want all of it.
And that's where people get the problem, is because they want all of it. And then because they see it as such a big goal and something that's unachievable, they don't do any of it.
But, I know earlier on, we were also talking about the stages of our lives that we're both at now, starting new businesses, and that extra energy and extra attention and extra work that you have to put into building the structures and getting the business to a place where you can then relax. But I just fear to think about how much pressure and stress you're putting on yourself by doing that sort of thing. And at what point do you really get to say, okay, I've built the business now up to this stage, it's going to thrive on its own, it's going to be fine, I can sit back and relax a bit without suffering from a burnout?
Okay, I've actually been there. I've actually suffered burnout. So in my previous business, I owned my gym, as I spoke about, for 12 years, and I took on everything. I was quite big in my community at the time. So I was part of Leith Chamber of Trade. I was doing carnivals and events. Anything that anybody would ask me to do, I would do it. I had my own TV show on Swansea Bay TV. I was on the radio once a week, and I did not know my head from my butt at one point, okay? But I think that you have to start recognizing that, because burnout is a killer. And believe me, stress and burnout are very, very different. Stress, where you feel that you are under a lot of pressure, is very different to burning out, where you literally cannot cope anymore. Everything is an effort for you, and you really don't want to get to that point. And does that mean that you have to take a step back and the business grows a little bit slower? Yeah. And that's where I've been at, because that's happened to me before. I've taken it slowly over the last year and a half. It's just that this 2 weeks is going to be a little bit, a little bit tougher, and you're going to have times like that. But what you don't want is that 2 weeks to be 2 months. 2 months, that's tough. Little short bouts of extra pressure is fine, and it means that you're growing because your business is growing. So therefore, mentally and physically, you will be growing. You just have to then maybe, like we said, cut out some other things. So I know for certain people, a client of mine is trying to do all of this because he's just got a new job, newish job, and he's trying to cope with all of the added pressures of that. But then he's also, when his friends are saying, oh, I haven't seen you for a while because of lockdown, let's go for a pint, let's go for a meal, he's trying to fit all that in as well, and his exercise. It's just not working. So there has to be a point where you maybe say to the people around you, I'm really sorry that I can't spend as much time with you at the moment. It's not because I don't want to. I love you and I appreciate you. But let me just tell you my story, and I'd love your support in that for the next week, month, or whatever that may be. As having that support network and that stress strategy in place is vitally important, however that looks for you as an individual,
So are the signs of stress the same as the signs of burnout?
No.
Or there, how do you know when you're suffering a burnout?
So stress is more where you're sort of on high alert and high energy. So you're still craving and looking for that next thing. It's like, yeah, I could take that on. So hyper, whereas burnout is the complete opposite. Burnout is complete fatigue, exhaustion. You have no energy to look for that next thing. You have no energy to do the 10 things you already have to do. Whereas when you're stressed, you seem to be in that overload so this is high up here, stress, and burnout is down here. So it's quite opposite, because you've got to that point where you absolutely cannot take anymore.
And I would imagine it's both physical, emotional, psychological.
Absolutely.
You just get to that point where you say, your mind's saying to you and your body's also saying to you, I can't take anymore, I can't go any further, and you just need help at that point, I'm assuming.
Definitely.
It's really, good to hear the differences, between all these things, and more so that there's negative stress, being able to identify it and knowing when you're at that point where it's, positive and negative, and also when you're at the point of burnout and asking for help. But do you have to get to the point of burnout to ask for help or look for help?
Ultimately, you don't want to do that. Ultimately, you need to start recognizing. And what I try to do with my programs and my clients is I try and get them to identify their stress early on, and like I said earlier, I think it's important to touch on, Pay, that a lot of people, when they're stressed, actually cause more of their own stress. So when you're, out of time, when you're scheduling everything in, you don't eat properly, you don't plan and prep your food, you get convenience, quick and easy food, which is very unhealthy. You tend to, maybe a lot of people may turn to alcohol or smoking, or, like I said earlier, a lot of caffeine, to keep them energized throughout the day. All of that is just completely adding to an already overloaded system. And I think that's where the problems arise. If we're talking stress, and, we all lead quite stressful, busy lives, because we're in this day and age, we are looking for the best career and to ultimately give our family the best and have the best we can. And okay, that's okay, but don't forget to counterbalance that with some rest and relaxation, downtime as well. And if you can find that balance, and okay, sometimes it may tip one way or the other, but if the majority of the time, like 80% of the time, you can find that balance, then you're on the right path. If 80% of the time you're completely overloaded, then there's going to ultimately come to a point where your mind and your body gives in. Your body will start. This machine is amazing. This machine we have is incredible. And I love to use this term of comparing it to your car. So many people like their nice new shiny cars. They put they look after it, they polish it, they take it for services and MOTs, put the best tires on it, put the best oil in it, look after the engine. They wouldn't put petrol in a diesel car. Yet this body, we tend to put as much rubbish in it as we can because it's quick and easy and convenient. We don't service it regularly, rest and relaxation. And we're not looking after this incredible machine as we would a piece of metal that's sitting outside our house. And that's how I like to explain it, because it's important that we understand this is the one place we're going to live for the rest of our lives. This is the one machine we will have for the rest of our lives. So we need to look after it.
Absolutely. I've had a couple of conversations with people, and a few arguments here and then as well about those relaxation moments. Those times when you feel, oh, okay, now is me time. I just need that 1 hour, 2 hours, how many, whatever length of time it is to sort of relax. But it's also about the activities that we do that we consider relaxing. And how they could actually be adding more negative stress to us. Say, for instance, if I decide on an evening, I just want to sit back on the couch, or let me use another example. Say, as my relaxation time, I want to go out to a pub or to have a drink, a few pints with a friend, and then you end up, having like pints and pints and pints, and you don't stop. Now, for you, in your head, you feel like that is relaxation. Is that sort of activity more of positive stress? Oh, no, more of negative stress.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because as I said, you're putting toxins into your body. And, what we don't realize is stress is calorific as well. So what I didn't mention earlier, is this unrelenting stress and constant release of cortisol can ultimately mean that we store fat. So if you're constantly releasing cortisol and adrenaline, but mainly cortisol, that is a fat storer, not a fat burning hormone. So unless you're balancing that and you're preventing this cortisol from being released all the time by leading a stressful life, and don't forget, going out and getting drunk means you don't sleep properly after drinking alcohol. So therefore you have that added stress of poor sleep hygiene. If you don't have adequate sleep, you wake with elevated cortisol the next day, and that elevated cortisol ultimately makes you crave sugary, salty, fatty foods again. So you're in this vicious cycle. What you think you're doing to benefit you, it may feel relaxing to you because you're having a break away from the norm and you're taking yourself away from the stressful job or family, whatever it may be. So I can see why people perceive it to be stress management, but it isn't. So going for a walk lowers cortisol. Having a bath in Epsom salts allows the body to relax because they're muscle relaxants. It'll help you sleep better. Doing yoga, doing meditation, doing mindfulness. However, as much as these are fantastic tools, don't forget they are only sticky plasters if you're not getting to the root of the problem. So ultimately, you have to target the stress at its root cause and then add those extra tools as your stress management strategy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Makes a lot of sense. I was laughing earlier on, while you were talking. I wasn't laughing at you. I was just laughing at myself because I'm so guilty, of these things. Not the alcohol, but it's the activities that I choose just for the relaxation, And oftentimes I have those moments when I think, oh, it's got to be a Joe's ice cream, for instance. Or then I have another nice hot sunny day, nice day to be out and relax and feeling nice. But before and I haven't walked, I haven't done anything. Put up my feet, sit in front of the television, watch television for 3 hours, fall asleep on the couch, wake up the following day when I should be feeling a lot more relaxed.
Feeling worse.
Yeah, I was the other day. So it's very educating to listen to, these tips that you're giving and areas that you're talking around and creating that awareness about the things that we need to be really mindful of.
And don't forget, what you're talking about there, Pay, is quite common for people. You're talking about the reward or punishment factor. So a lot of people will say, do you know what, I've had a really busy week, I deserve a bottle of wine, or I deserve a pizza, or I deserve the ice cream. I've had a really busy week. But then on the flip side of that, they'll go, I've had a terrible week. Do you know what? I've had an awful week. I deserve a pizza or beer or, so when are we going to get into the mindset of, okay, rather than using food, for instance, then, or alcohol as a treat or a reward, we just make it a normal part of our life. And we say, okay, on a Saturday night, I have a pizza and a couple of beers. That's fine. But, Monday to Friday, I don't do that. So like I said earlier, instead of living in this all or nothing mindset, you're finding that middle ground of comfort where you still have a little of what you love. I love a pizza and a beer on a Saturday night. I love a bar of chocolate on maybe a Wednesday morning, but I don't allow that all of the time, but I allow it because I don't want to prevent myself from having it. I don't want to use it as a reward or a punishment. I have it because I like having it instead of labeling it with a reward or punishment status.
I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay, so I'd like to talk a little bit more about, the work that you do with businesses and privately with the one-to-one and group coaching programs that you've got available. And again, going back to some of the things you do, helping businesses to maintain a healthy, happy workforce with your workshops and wellbeing programs, and tailoring that kind of support, to whatever organization needs it or whatever individual needs it.
Mhm.
I'm just curious to know what some of these stress factors are within organizations you have found, and how those are different from the ones you have found with individuals, or maybe they're not different. I don't
No.
know.
They're not different, to be honest with you. I think a lot of people stress, maybe not so much now since COVID. Perhaps it's not so bad, because a lot of people are working from home, which I think a lot, for many people, they do find that better. Some people don't. So again, it's not a one size fits all. But I think in regards to workplace, which I really believe a lot of workplaces are now avidly trying to change this, was the stress of deadlines, of hitting targets, of, achieving X amount of work in a small proportion of time. Plus, don't forget, you do get sort of the negative working environments. I mean, I've worked with so many clients that have been bullied in the workplace. That is huge. The stress of that is just unbelievable. And when you haven't got an infrastructure in place where the management actually deal with that, and it's the management that's doing the bullying, then what do you do? Where do you go from there? So I think stress in the workplace can be so different. It varies from, like I said, workload, or to a negative working environment where you could be sitting next to somebody in an office that is not a nice person, or somebody that's very negative throughout the day. But let's look at just something very small in a working environment. You do have that culture of, let's go and get cakes. The managers may reward the staff then by going and doing a cake delivery, a cake run, or having just that tin of sweets at Christmas time. So a working environment can be negative in several ways. But I think what's important to understand is that for many people, they spend more hours in their working environment than they do at home. So that working environment needs to try and be as healthy and as positive as it can be. And if that can't be created by the person themselves, it has to try and come from above. And that's what I try and teach, I suppose, then within my workshops, is how we can make that working environment more positive, healthier and happier for everybody. And I know, listen, some businesses have extreme deadlines, and it has to be bespoke to that specific business. But if we can create a happier, healthier environment to work in, then the whole workforce would be more productive. It'll be a nicer place to work. It'll be more supportive. Therefore, you get more out of your staff. You get less sickness days. You get less, stress-related illnesses from that working environment. But it's very, very individual to each business.
Oh, wow. And I know we've talked a lot, around how stress can impact on our minds and our bodies, and, how to reduce it, how to manage it better, and ultimately, of course, with the aim of becoming healthier and happier. And that's what your work does a lot, helping people to take back control of their lives, their health, their happiness, and enabling them to reach their true potential.
Absolutely.
And your programs provide a lot of tools that help people, to go past these obstacles that stand in their ways of being successful, and to gain more clarity and start believing in themselves again, or start believing, continue believing in themselves.
Yep.
What are some of the tools that you employ in achieving these amazing outcomes?
I think ultimately the first thing that I work on, and I think the most important thing, is encouraging people to get to know themselves again. Because so many people that are stressed or on the verge of burnout have absolutely no idea who they are anymore. Life has taken over, family, commitment, job. They're coming at the bottom of this ladder, the bottom rung of the ladder, and they have no idea who they are, what they want, or how they're going to achieve that anymore. So the very first task is to get to know themselves, like themselves, and love themselves. And ultimately, we get to the point of believing in themselves again. But for many of them, they don't even know who they are anymore, what they want out of life, where they're going with their life, because they're so busy pleasing everybody else and doing for everybody else that they don't do anything for themselves. So the tools that we put in place, I mean, one of my favorite tools, and the first thing that I give my clients, is to start journaling. To start to get their thoughts and feelings and emotions out on paper, because that ultimately will get them to know themselves. They get to know that little ego role in their head. So, that negative self-talk that we have, how does that impact on you? What is that negative self-talk? Is it comparison to other people? Is it people pleasing? Is it overthinking? What is that biggest negative self-talk that you have? And what causes it? What's the root cause of that? What triggers? Is it your relationship? Is it a family member? Is it your working environment? So we get back to basics and start digging deep onto who that person is there and then. And they do that by journaling and getting to know themselves, spending some time in peace, in quiet, journaling and getting intimate, really, I suppose, with their thoughts and feelings and emotions. And how they behave and react because of those thoughts and feelings and emotions is absolutely vital to know, because that's dictating how they behave every single day, isn't it?
Yeah, true. Very true. I mean, it just feels like there's so much to take in here.
It is.
Around so many different things, and they're all related. But I seem to have teased out, three main things from our discussions today, and that is the role of exercise, nutrition, and hormone in our mindsets. But how do I know I'm balanced in my mindset? Do I have to combine those three, exercise, nutrition, and hormones? Or is it all right to just sort of, concentrate on one of those aspects or two of them, I don't know, at the expense of one other one? Or
I think we need to try
all three.
I think we need to try and find a balance of everything, don't we? So, I mean, ultimately, for me, it would be definitely managing stress. So having some sort of stress strategy in place. And don't forget, for people that are extremely stressed out, they may not exercise at the moment. So depending on, obviously, I would do an initial consultation with somebody when they first come to me. And if they're severely stressed, I would tell them to walk every day. I would not tell them to do any other exercise. So everybody's individual. So whether you look at exercise as actual exercise, lifting weights or running, etc., or you look at it as general activity, because don't forget, a lot of people now are not very active. They're sitting on Zoom every day or whatever, and they're not active. So for those people, they may just need to implement walking as their exercise or activity. Yes, refining the food, because if you're intaking too much sugar, then that's an added stress. You get brain fog, you can't function properly, you're zapped of energy after that quick influx of energy from the sugar. And ultimately, both of those things enable you to balance hormones. So with balanced hormones and reducing the cortisol and adrenaline effect, preventing, I don't want to go too technical today because I don't want to confuse anybody, but preventing insulin from kicking in a lot, because don't forget, insulin is a blood sugar regulating hormone. So if we've got a high intake of sugar constantly, then we're constantly releasing insulin. And ultimately, as you know, the negative effect of that long term, if it's excessive, can result in type 2 diabetes. So you're looking at balancing the hormones. So yes, they're all important. They're all important, but it's about finding how you implement that into your life as an individual. And I would really like to highlight the fact that not all of this has to be huge. It doesn't have to be as big as how you perceive it in your head, because if you're not doing those things at the moment, you tend to not do them because you think it's too much hassle, it's too much of a chore, it's too much work. It doesn't have to be too much work. So for like a tip, if you can take away anything from today, I would say get out and walk more. And even if you're somebody that works from home, schedule your meetings so you've got 10 or 15 minutes in between them. Go walk down your street, walk back up, get back on a Zoom meeting. Do that in between every meeting. So it doesn't have to be an hour's workout. It can be 5 minutes down to the bottom of the street and back. I've seen me in the rain going up and down my stairs several times in between meetings. It's about moving the body and moving the mind away from where it is at the moment and reframing, because we tend to get stuck in one train of thought instead of taking ourselves away from it. And just removing yourself from that from 5 minutes is stress management. It's clearing your mind, it's reframing your thoughts, and you can come back refreshed. So, that can be small. It doesn't have to be an hour's workout. It can just be movement for now. Food, limit your, watch your sugar intake. And I mean from refined sugar, like man-made cakes, biscuits, cereals, chocolates, crisps, all of that type of stuff. We do still need carbohydrates. They're our main source of energy, but have them more with your main meal and go for things like wholemeal rice, wholemeal pasta, sweet potato, quinoa, those types of things instead. And make sure that you bulk up on proteins and vegetables that keep you fuller for longer, prevent hunger and prevent cravings. Drink plenty of water so that you're hydrated. Those are basic things that you can do with ease. Everybody can do those with ease. And if you start there, or change one of those things this week. So this week, go for a 5-minute walk in between your calls, done. Next week, do your 5-minute walk in between calls, but cut out your sugar or cut down on your sugar. The following week, do both of those things, but make sure you get to bed a little bit earlier. So take it at baby steps, and then all of a sudden, within a month, you've made 4 changes. Does that make sense?
I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned from you recently, and I've got to talk about this because I want everybody to know, the sort of changes that I'm making in my life, to have a better and more stabilized well-being. It's that thought initially that, I just haven't got the time. I work full-time hours. I haven't got the time to go and walk. I haven't got the time to run. I'm doing so many things. I'm trying to start a business, conceptualizing around the talk show, for instance, and all of that. And also the effect of the lockdown and not being able to get out as much as I wanted to. And being in front of the laptop, being in Zoom meetings all day, not going around, the house too much. And you know what that does, when you're constantly sitting down, you want to pop something in your mouth, and after your main meal, it will always be a biscuit or chocolates or ice cream and I know what that did to me in the last 15 months or so of the lockdown. And it was after having these conversations with yourself that I started to, in the last, it's only been 10 days, that I woke up one morning and I thought, I tell you what it was. It was after the TEDx night.
Yeah.
When I saw myself in that outfit that I wore, when I saw the photos, I thought, woman, if you don't do something now, you're in trouble.
Well, I thought you looked amazing, but I can understand that we all look at ourselves differently, don't we?
Well, on a very light note, I think if I was in that outfit 1 year ago, I would have looked even more fabulous.
Yeah, okay. So that's your goal.
I woke up the following morning and I thought to myself, no, this has got to stop. You've got to make conscious effort. And I think that's the most important thing that we need to be able to do, to be able to tell ourselves the truth. And straight away, I cut off sugar, I cut off milk, and I cut off bread from my diet. I said to myself, no more. Instead of sugar now, white sugar, which I've done for so many years of my life, I just do the sweetness or a little bit of nectarine syrup in my tea, and that's it. And I cut off milk completely, which has not only just, helped me feel better, but it's also helped with my IBS, which I suffer from time to time. Okay. And honestly, in less than 10 years, and I've cut off carbs as well. Well, not cut them off, but reduced.
Don't cut them completely.
Yeah, reduced carbs and injected more vegetables, more fruits, into my daily menu. And honestly, in 10 days,
you feel better.
I feel a lot better, like 70% better than I did before then. So definitely there's something in, there's something just really positive about everything that you said.
And you just think that they're just small changes and you've already feel so much better. There's 2 things I want to touch on there from what you said. So just a little tip for everybody. Like Patient said, in the evening when you have your evening meal, you want to go for a biscuit or whatever after. Okay, now sometimes those types of cravings, specifically at the end of the day, can mean that you didn't eat substantially enough throughout the day. So don't forget, it needs energy. So food is our energy. Instead of us looking at food as, ooh, yummy, we need to look at food as our energy. So it's like putting petrol in your car. Now, even if you're sat at your laptop, you still need energy. So if you haven't eaten substantially throughout the day because you've been busy on your laptop, by the end of the day, you're going to be in starvation mode and you're going to want to eat everything. So if you can blunt that effect by eating proteins and vegetables quite frequently throughout the day, snacking on things like carrots, celeries, peppers, cucumbers, boiled eggs, I don't know, whatever you can think of, and just have those frequently throughout the day, by the time you get to that evening meal, you should be able to just eat that evening meal. If you can't and you're still going for biscuits, that's then habit rather than you actually needing that food. So that's one tip. And the second thing I want to touch on is that you said about your IBS and your IBS being better. Now, the brain is the gut is the second brain. Okay, so if we don't look after our gut, then we are causing a huge amount of stress. And IBS is actually quite stress related. That isn't definitive. I'm not saying it is only caused by stress, but it can be triggered by stress. Specifically, if stress of toxins, of poor food habits, etc., etc. So I wanted to just touch on those two things as well, because you brought them up.
Yeah, right. So just before we go, in the UK, we're beginning to, as with most other countries of the world, we're beginning to come out of lockdown and hopefully starting to put COVID-19, behind us, or the pandemic itself, because we've been told, isn't it, we're going to have to learn to live with the virus. It will be with us for a while. The effects have been drastically reduced by the vaccination campaigns and the vaccination programs, sorry. So we are starting to put the pandemic behind us. But then countless people have suffered mental health and well-being issues as a result of this unprecedented pandemic and the associated lockdown. What tips can you share to encourage people to seek help?
Again, I think you are right. People have suffered mentally. I mean, I suffered mentally myself through it, to be honest. As I said earlier, I suffer with depression, and it doesn't just go away. We just have to deal with it and try and reduce the bouts we have and the impact it has on us. But what I would say is, again, take baby steps, because I think just diving back out into a world where you may be scared, you may be worried about the virus, or you may even just be worried about mixing with people again because it's something you haven't done for a long time. Take baby steps. And again, I cannot stress, I love that word. I cannot stress enough having a supportive network around you. So whether you reach out to friend or family member, but you have to have that support around you. In regards to mental health, it is ultimately important you have somebody to talk to, whether that's a professional or just a friend, but you need to offload. Keeping it to yourself and keeping everything in is only going to make matters worse. Now, just to explain how the brain works, the brain will attach to negativity, unfortunately. Okay, so the brain attaches to negativity so that it can create a process for us to deal with that negative situation again in the future. What that means for us, unfortunately, is specifically people with mental health issues, is this one little negative thing, and this and this and this and this and this one, they all come together to make this huge ball that's completely blown out of proportion. So without getting that out of your head, whether you're writing it down so you can see it in more clarity, or you talk to somebody about it, that is vitally important. We do not want to leave all of this overthinking and all of this manifestation of negativity up in our head. Does that make sense? So ultimately, there are so many mental health organisations out there now, specifically since the pandemic. I've seen a fantastic new one has opened in Swansea. It looks great. So, I mean, do some research and reach out to somebody. You can even phone a private line where nobody will know who you are. But I would definitely say it needs to come out of here. By keeping everything inside and pretending you're okay and wearing that mask is only causing you more harm in the long term. And eventually you're going to explode. And how, obviously everybody's different. How that presents in people is very different, but you cannot keep it stored inside.
Well, there we are. Emma, I must say to you that the experience, of talking around stress and burnout with you this evening has been real. It's been full of inspiration. We've managed to inject a bit of entertainment in between that, sharing our experiences, and definitely a lot of information coming out of there as well. So it's been such a great pleasure having you on PayTalks, and thank you to everyone who's watched us this evening. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to PayTalks YouTube channel, and we shall see you again very soon. Thank you very much, and it's PayBen2 signing off for PayTalks.